You've been quoted as saying there's no intention of doing a sequel. Is that something you're thinking about or you're interested in?
No, we really like that this movie lives on its own.
If only...
Got the sneaking suspicion that we're not giving the people what they want.
How right you are.
When I was on set at Joker, I would talk with the other actors and we'd go, we don't get it. I'm grateful to have sat in a trailer for 3 months and been a small part of probably the worst film ever made. Arguably the worst film ever on a screen.
When it was announced that a Joker sequel was in the works, it was worrisome. Joker was such a surprise hit. Any sequel might jeopardize the goodwill that the first one drummed up.
And it did.
Then when it was announced that the second Joker movie was going to be a Joker musical, well, it confused a lot of people. Having said that, it made perfect sense to me. The movie already made clear that Arthur Fleck was an unreliable narrator. So much so that the movie's narrative is really just a reflection of how Arthur's chosen to interpret his surroundings.
I used to think that my life was a tragedy, but now I realize
It's a musical. Conceptually, this is so profoundly bizarre that I can't for the life of me hate it. Actually, I kinda love the story structure. Following a man with mental problems comprehending reality through the veil of fantasy. And for all the very justified hazing I'm about to give this director, I do want to give him credit as well. He's got a serious pair of bat balls for even attempting to tell this type of story. It's an earnest attempt that yields interesting results some of the time.
Nice form, but a little rough on the landing. He may have to settle for the bronze.
And here to properly pronounce the title of today's French movie is an actual French person.
Joker, Folie A Deux.
And that means...
Joker, minus of 2.
And how do you say that again?
Va te faire foutre.
For all the hate this movie's got, I do think that there's a fair bit to love. For starters, the cast. You have some talents returning to their roles from the first film. As per usual, Joaquin Phoenix is great as Arthur Fleck. He seems hopeless and just generally confused by basic human interaction. He's gullible and easily fooled by a desire to be loved, even if he's being completely misunderstood in the process. He is so affection-starved that he's willing to settle for being loved for who he isn't, rather than being hated for who he is. I made mention in my review about the first Joker movie that this Joker seems to be a mimic. Having next to no socialization his whole life has led him to look to others for a sense of normalcy. He doesn't know how to act in any given situation, so he needs to observe others for clarity. And I think that becomes even more obvious in this film than it was in the first one. Showcasing this trait of his by having him change speech patterns to match the host when he's being interviewed.
Tell us, what's changed, Arthur?
I'll tell you what's changed, Patty.
And then later on in the courtroom when he's playing the part of defense attorney with an over-the-top southern drawl.
Tell me, sir, is that your God-given name?
That is until he's interrogating Gary, at which point he resorts to mocking the way that he speaks.
Is it me? So you don't think this is me? Well, maybe you don't know who I really was.
This is a man who has none of the answers, but all of the confidence of somebody who just aced their test, spending the time afforded looking at everyone else's sheets. Due to his newfound fame and being admired for all the wrong reasons, Arthur begins to play the part more, acting more and more like the Joker and less like himself. A distinction that this movie makes, and then doubles down on in the climax. But even when playing court jester in the courts, his humanity still starts to break through his face paint. When he realizes he scared the one person who ever showed him any kind of kindness, he's taken back, and for a second, shook. And he drops the act momentarily, because he is so thrown off of his performance. Now, moments like this are a little ham-fisted because that's kind of the name of the game with these movies, but they're important moments to show that Arthur is just playing a part. He really isn't the Joker. The Joker is just what he's perceived to be.
You have no idea.
The biggest irony here is that neither Joker movie is really a Joker movie. The first movie is the story of a man losing his grip with reality and looking for an escape. A movie that ends with our character becoming the titular character. But then the second Joker movie doesn't see him as that titular character throughout. Instead, it shows us the fallout of a one-off Joker incident. Arthur Fleck is not the Joker, a statement I will be bringing up later on in this video. In spite of that, I enjoy Arthur Fleck for what he is. He's a very interesting character, and like any great Batman character, he is born from tragedy. Then you have Lady Gaga's Harley Quinn. Lee Quinzel. As you'd expect from a Harley performance, Gaga definitely brings a chaotic deviant energy to the role, but it's less psychotic devoted lapdog and more pathological liar degenerate. So it's the same, but different. This time around, the manipulated has become the manipulator. She's gone from sheep to snake. This Harley is borderline sociopathic, catering to Arthur's dark side and trying to bring it out at any cost, in an effort to push herself into the limelight, completely neglecting the person beneath the persona. This Joker and Harley romance is considerably different from its usual depiction. Whereas typically the Joker is shown to be the one taking advantage and manipulating Harley, telling her all sorts of fictional origins to earn her trust, to gain her love, to forge a bond through lies. The opposite is true here. The Harley-Joker dynamic is completely reversed. Lee lies to Arthur, finding fake common ground based on a backstory that's basically bullshit.
I grew up in the same neighborhood. Me and my friends used to take that staircase to school every day.
But she didn't grow up in your neighborhood. She lives on the Upper West Side with her parents.
Sorry, kid. Your dad was killed in a car accident.
Her father is not dead. He's a doctor.
My mother had me committed.
She voluntarily committed herself to the hospital and then just checked herself out when she wanted to.
You know, I must have watched that TV movie they made about you like 20 times. Oh, probably more like 4 or 5.
She's playing you for a fool.
I just wanted you to like me.
This actually goes beyond her just telling a few white lies about her upbringing. Because like OG HQ, Lee has a degree in psychiatry.
Did she mention she went to grad school for psychiatry?
And was only put in Arthur's proximity because she voluntarily checked herself in and out of a ward. She only did this to get close to him, to get her hooks in him. Harley is very blatantly taking advantage of Arthur. Lee is obsessed with the idea of the Joker, loving the myth but loathing the man behind it. She love bombs and gaslights him into a romance that is really just a means of making media rounds. This isn't very subtle at all. Her actions are very blatant. Her intentions and motivations become painfully clear very early on. But Arthur's rose-tinted glasses blind him to the obvious. So while we, the audience, have the luxury of understanding the situation, Arthur is still unfortunately as clueless as ever. Now, I don't hate these changes. I definitely don't love them. They're not my ideal Harley and Joker, and I don't think they're going to be a lot of other people's either. I think ideally I'd like to see the romance between the rogues depicted in a somewhat similar manner to the originals, especially considering that this is the first Joker Harley movie ever made. It's just strange to see that this was the route that they went down. As its own one-off, it's fine for what it is, but it feels like a mistake to make this the inaugural depiction. It's also not the first time we've seen this type of role reversal between the rogues, with the Harley falling for Joker and not taking a liking to Jack, the man who was once the Joker in White Knight, or Harley taking advantage and manipulating a Joker into a life of crime in the Telltale games. It's been done before a couple times, but never on the big screen. I think this is an interesting story to tell. And maybe the lack of chemistry between the two is a fixture of the plot and not a failure. But I mean it when I say these two combined might just be the worst Joker and Harley. I mean, they're the best elements of the movie, mind you, but they're the worst Joker and Harley. I mean, Jared Leto and Margot Robbie weren't perfect, but at least they had a connection. You know, you could feel the chemistry between the two. You understood how these two psychopaths could have a romance. At least they had that, and at least one of them was Margot Robbie. I will say, in terms of cast, even the more minor new additions are played by pretty talented people as well. Brendan Gleeson and Tim Dillon are Arkham security guards, Catherine Keener acts as Arthur's lawyer, and there's even a Harvey Dent. That was a surprise inclusion that I wasn't expecting, though in hindsight, considering this is a courtroom setting, I probably should have. Harvey acts as the district attorney in the case against Arthur. He's bold and confident to a near cocky extent. A very self-assured individual who seems to know what he's doing. Honestly, all things considered, this is a pretty solid adaptation of the hero turned half-villain. We don't really get into his personal life or anything like that, nor should we given his place in the story, but for the small part that he played in it, I think that he was very good for what he was. Outside of the cast, there's a couple creative choices that I enjoyed. The cartoon that opened up the movie was a fun throwback to the first film that recapped the most important moments, brought audiences up to date with a recap in an entertaining way, and put emphasis on one of the movie's main narratives. The film puts a focus on split identities. It's a false narrative Arthur's legal team goes with in an attempt to get him released, stating that Arthur Fleck isn't responsible for his crimes. The Joker is. The cartoon short shows Arthur arguing with his shadow to showcase his conflict of self. I have no doubt that the introduction of Harvey into this narrative is a wink and nod to his time as Two-Face, as that character is pretty much the epitome of dual identity. But this narrative gets really muddled. You see, Arthur's lawyer is desperate to prove that he isn't the Joker, that the Joker is in fact some separate entity. For a time being, we hear a lot of the people on trial say that there is no distinction between the two, that Arthur doesn't have a split personality. Now, Harley wants the world to see that Arthur is the Joker, that they're one and the same, and that that's her man. So Harley convinces Arthur to be the Joker, convincing him to start wearing the face paint, to don the suits, to play the part. Except when he starts acting like the Joker in court, proving that he is in fact the Joker, he's serving as his own attorney to claim that he isn't the Joker, and that the two aren't the same, and he starts interviewing witnesses that say that he actually wasn't acting like himself on that night. And I assure you, it is all just as confusing as it sounds. I don't know what the point they were trying to make was, but I don't think that they made it. This story beat also doesn't have a satisfying conclusion, because it just ends with Arthur admitting that there is no Joker. He did all of those things himself. Again, I like the creative conceptually, but it's not one that's executed particularly well, nor does it seem to serve any kind of a purpose. The plot's pointless. If I want to see Jungian theory through a Batman lens, I will play Arkham Shadow, thank you very much. Another thing I find mildly amusing is this universe's inclusion of Arthur in historic Batman moments. He's always there as a bystander, but he's also inadvertently causing a lot of these things to happen. Arthur Fleck is like a DC's Forrest Gump. In the first film, he inadvertently causes the murder of the Waynes, as it's one of his followers that guns them down in Crime Alley. Now in the second film, he inadvertently causes Harvey Dent's facial scarring when one of his followers bombs the courthouse that he's in, with Handsome Harvey's good looks being collateral. Somehow, Arthur Fleck, this absolute nobody, is deeply tied into the roots of Batman, the Joker, and Two-Face, just to name a few. Now, if you could believe it or not, while I've been a little bit critical, those were all the things I either liked or just didn't hate about this movie. Now, I give you all that first because, well, this next part's probably going to be a lot longer. This movie sucks.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was V Infuso. It's a bad joke.
Moving on! This movie has a severe identity crisis, because it's both trying to act as a sequel to the first film, with lingering elements sticking around in terms of tone, that completely clash with the style of this new movie. Which makes sense, as it's going from drama to musical, two wildly different types of storytelling. Joker 2 is constantly teeter-tottering these two tonal different genres, and it is crushed under the weight of that Herculean task. It doesn't work as both, and it never succeeds as either. Also, due to the narrative structure of the story, it does make things confusing. You're not just watching and enjoying the story, you're constantly trying to decipher and decode it. It's hard to understand what from the musical numbers is actually happening, or why the musical numbers are happening. Are these Arthur's interpretations of what's currently going on? Is this a daydream? A fantasy? A regular dream? A nightmare? I don't know. It's hard to say when the movie itself feels like a fever dream. I just think you're asking your audience for far too much when you basically want them to analyze every aspect of your film. And yes, I understand the irony of me saying that when I am doing just that. Joker 2 is completely unorganized. It is all over the place, and I don't know that it knows what it's trying to say. It's not even a fun kind of mess, it's just confusion mostly. The movie is all over the place pace-wise. It's constantly progressing, but it's passing through what should be major moments in a very mundane manner. Like somehow we're moving at breakneck speed, but it still doesn't feel like it's actually going anywhere. You don't really feel the weight of moments because things just happen. The music doesn't often fit the scenes that it's accompanying, which would always be a problem in a movie, but is an even bigger problem in a musical. Songs just seem to happen. Sometimes they're spaced out, sometimes they're not. You might hear them one after the other, you might hear them several scenes apart, just go with it. Now, I'm not a music aficionado. I haven't watched a lot of musicals. There's maybe like one I like. But these songs don't really do anything. They don't add to the story. They don't help tell the story. I don't know, I kind of feel like Todd Phillips saw the disaster of a movie that Sia made and just thought, oh yeah, I also want to ruin my career in that capacity. Let me have a go at it. These musical numbers don't convey information, which is what they're actually supposed to do. In musicals, songs progress the plot. They don't put the story on pause so they could belt out a number and then come back to it. It doesn't work that way. When these actors are singing, not a lot of information is being sang. Not a lot of plot points are coming across. Nor are the songs particularly memorable. There is not one song, not one performance in this movie that makes me think, I get why you needed to make this a musical. Not one.
Just talk to me. Just talk. Stop singing.
I also think a lot of the movie's dialogue, especially when it comes to the courtroom scenes, was excessively repetitive. The same questions are asked over and over again, just in different ways, as sometimes they get re-asked right after they've first been asked, and it gets old fast. And it was boring always, but I think what's even worse is despite this being the same line of questioning, it somehow yields different results. Those on the witness stand are giving different answers to the same questions, and I think that might actually infuriate me more than them being asked the same questions, but with different wording. Now, earlier on in the video, I said that there were some creative choices that I could stand behind. I will also add that there are some creative choices that I want to stand as far as humanly possible away from. Decisions were made in this movie that I think were not only a mistake for this project, but would also be a mistake in almost any Batman-related project ever. So there's this weird undertone of SA that becomes an overtone before being completely forgotten. It's unneeded, it doesn't serve the narrative in any way, shape, or form, and it doesn't change anything in the story. You can genuinely take these one or two scenes out.
I wish somebody would.
And it would change absolutely nothing. It's a very strange addition because it's just not something you'd expect to see in a superhero-adjacent movie or in a musical. I would even go as far to say it might feel out of place in the first flick, and that was a drama. Not only is it so bizarre, but it is passed over like it never happened. Actually, following this event, a character is killed, and then that's never brought up again either. These things are, and then they aren't, and that's it. I could honestly go on and on with how random and wrong and just overall odd this was. But I'm not going to, because quite frankly, like the movie itself, I would like to move on and forget this ever happened. So I'm going to. Moving on! The thing that seems to have been ridiculed most about this movie, even more than the last thing I just spoke of, is its ending. A fan theory come true, which just makes me hate fans, despite being an avid fan. In the end, it's revealed that Arthur was never really the Joker. He was just the starting point for the character, with the eventual Joker meeting him in Arkham, taking his life, and afterward, taking his name, really cementing his legacy and claim for the clown throne by carving a smile into his cheeks using the knife that he just used on Arthur. This is an ending that Todd Phillips has defended, claiming that the movie was called Joker and not The Joker. But respectfully, Todd can shut the up. I'm sorry, respectfully, this is such a cop-out. Even if this was always the plan, which I do not feel like it was, even if it was always the plan, it doesn't matter because the plan still sucks. 2 movies and a bunch of show tunes to lead up to some NPC in the story becoming the guy? Yeah, no thank you, pass. There are so many reasons this moment doesn't work, so I'm just going to go through a couple of them because I've actually had this conversation once before on the channel. Making the Joker a carbon-based copycat cheapens the Clown Prince of Crime. No longer is his brand of chaos unique to him. He's literally just taken the page out of someone else's book, filling out someone else's clown shoes. It's hard to accept that Batman's greatest foe was really just someone following in someone else's footsteps. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. The Joker's not the one to take the torch from someone else. He's the guy who will torch the previous mantle holder for sure, and then throw his crown in the garbage. He wouldn't accept being a secondary psychopath. He has his own brand of lunacy, and the Joker identity should be exclusive to him. It is distinctly his own. I literally made a video about this exact same thing when Gotham almost made this very mistake. Luckily they didn't, but apparently because they didn't, history didn't learn its lesson, so hopefully it will now. Future writers, please don't make the Joker a junior. This movie isn't great. It's weird, and not in the good or thought-provoking kind of way. This absolutely has to be one of the worst and one of the weirdest Batman-adjacent movies ever made. I enjoyed the first Joker film, but I also said that I felt like Todd Phillips felt like it was deeper than it actually was. He was getting real artsy-fartsy with it, and I think his territory into this one was him doubling down on that. I like what this man's created, but I think that he's patting himself on the back for making a cinematic Picasso, when in reality it was really just a good finger-painting home movie. Respectfully. And I think this movie has confirmed my bias. I feel like this was meant to be Todd Phillips' magnum opus to the world, and instead it might just have been his biggest mistake. I don't hate Joker 2 because I don't care enough to hate Joker 2. I don't have any real feelings toward Joker 2. In spite of my love for the first one, the second one couldn't even capture my attention, let alone my investment. This is an unfortunate secondary act into what was a groundbreaking first installment. And because of that, it's kinda sullied the reputation of that first film, with that now being lumped in with this. Unfairly so. From now on, when people think of Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, they're gonna think of musical shower, which I don't know about you, but to me is not necessarily ideal. Unfortunately, Joker really tarnished its own legacy with this one. The movie wasn't good by any means, and by most, actually, it was pretty bad. But it's even worse when you think of what this followed. Joker 2 on its own right, pretty poor. Joker 2 as a sequel, extremely disappointing. But with all that being said, that was Joker 2. The story of immediate success followed by incredible failure. Boy, can I relate. So if you like this video as much as I didn't like that movie, and you'd maybe want to see more Joker-related content here on the channel, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
But the joke's on you. I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was V Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.